How to shut down guilt tripping instantly and gently. Guilt doesn't usually sound harsh. It sounds reasonable, caring, sometimes even loving. That's why it works. And that's why it can quietly wear you down without ever turning into a clear argument. Most people don't give in to guilt because they're weak. They give in because guilt feels relational. It feels like it's about being a good person, not about pressure. It often shows up as concern, as disappointment, as subtle reminders of everything someone else has done for you. And before you realize what's happening, the decision you were making quietly turns into something you feel responsible for. Guilt tripping is one of the most common forms of emotional manipulation, precisely because it doesn't feel manipulative in the moment. It feels human, reasonable, even caring on the surface. Over time, though, that pressure adds up. It doesn't just influence decisions. It changes how safe it feels to say no. You start hesitating before you speak, explaining more than you need to, saying yes just to avoid the emotional weight that comes with refusing. I'm Stephen Walters, and I help people communicate clearly and stay grounded when conversations get noisy or tense. In this video, we're going to look at 7 common ways guilt tripping shows up, how those moments take hold so quickly, and what helps them lose their grip without you having to harden yourself or over-explain. As you listen, notice which one makes it harder to say no without feeling uneasy. That's often where guilt quietly starts, shaping your decisions. Point number 1, after everything I've done for you. This one usually shows up quietly. Not as a demand, more like a reminder. Someone brings up past sacrifices, favors, or effort right when you're hesitating. And suddenly the present moment feels crowded by the past. What tends to happen next is subtle. Your decision stops being about what makes sense now and starts being about what you owe. What helps here is noticing when history is being pulled into a moment where it doesn't belong. Once you catch that shift, the emotional weight often eases, and the decision gets clearer again. If this kind of moment already feels familiar, you're exactly who this channel is for. I break down these quiet forms of pressure every week, so if you want to help staying clear and grounded in conversations like this, you can subscribe and keep going with me. Sometimes the pressure doesn't come from the past. Sometimes it comes from comparison. Point number 2, the comparison that shrinks you. This form of guilt doesn't accuse directly. It just points sideways. Everyone else seems to manage. Other people don't have a problem with this. And just like that, your choice starts to feel selfish or lacking. The hard part is that nothing aggressive was said, but inside, something tightens. What helps here is noticing how comparison quietly replaces context. Once you see that your situation has been flattened to make a point, the guilt loses some of its pull. Other times, guilt doesn't show up in words at all. Point 3, the disappointed silence. Sometimes nothing is said, and that's the point. A pause, a sigh, a look that lingers a little too long, and you start filling in the blanks yourself. And often what you imagine is heavier than anything that would have been spoken. What helps here is recognizing that silence can carry pressure without carrying clarity. Just because something feels heavy doesn't mean it's yours to resolve. Now, in other cases, guilt wears the mask of concern. Point number 4, I'm just worried about you. This one is especially confusing because it sounds kind. Concern is expressed, but it lands like judgment. You're told it's about your safety, your future, your well-being. Yet the message underneath feels like disapproval. The result is often internal conflict. You don't want to dismiss care, but you also don't feel respected. What helps here is separating care from control. Once you notice when worry is being used to steer your choice, you can hear it without surrendering to it. And sometimes the guilt goes a step further. Point number 5, making you responsible for their feelings. This form of guilt places emotional weight directly on you. I guess I'll just be upset then. I didn't expect you to hurt me like this. Now, the decision isn't about the request anymore. It's about preventing emotional fallout. Over time, this teaches you something dangerous, that saying no causes harm. What helps here is noticing the emotional handoff as it happens. When you see where responsibility quietly shifts, you're less likely to carry feelings that aren't yours. And when this keeps happening, it changes how boundaries feel. Point number 6, how guilt slowly softens your no. Repeated guilt doesn't usually break boundaries outright. It erodes them. You start explaining more, apologizing for reasonable limits, checking in on how your no was received. Eventually, saying yes feels easier than carrying the emotional aftermath. What helps here is noticing how much energy goes into managing reactions instead of making decisions. That awareness alone can stop the slow slide because it puts the focus back on choice instead of reaction. And when guilt becomes familiar, it leaves a mark. Point number 7, what guilt pressure does over time. When guilt shows up often enough, it changes your internal balance. You hesitate before speaking. You second-guess choices that once felt clear. You feel tired after conversations that shouldn't have been heavy. Not because you did something wrong, but because the pressure keeps following you. If you've been wondering why certain conversations leave you tired, even when nothing went wrong, this is usually why. What helps here is naming guilt as a pattern, not a personal flaw. Because once it has a name, it doesn't have to define how you see yourself. Guilt tripping works because it feels human. It speaks to care, loyalty, and connection. But clarity doesn't require hardness, and protecting your footing doesn't mean you stop caring. Now, before we wrap up, which one of these stood out most for you? Leave that in a comment below so we can talk about it later. If you want to continue, this next video looks at what happens internally when pressure keeps building, especially during heated conversations. Thanks for watching. I'll see you there.